Hey there, Rednecks, Preppies, Redneck Preppies. It's me, the Redneck Preppy. How you doing today? Great, good. Just a friendly reminder that the Redneck Preppy can also be found on Rumble and Odyssey. Links are in the description below. Time for another huge generator of traffic for this channel, a book review, yeah. Today we're going to be looking at the latest offering of Headstamp Publishing, Clockwork Basilisk, the early Revolvers of Elisha Collier and Artemas Wheeler, comes in at a total of about 600 pages and US $120, spanning 2 volumes. Nicholson's effort casts its eye on the early world revolvers, specifically of those Americans Wheeler and Collier. Now, a wag might say Wheeler alone, because Nicholson seems to argue in Clockwork Basilisk it appears early design and invention was a result of his work to make a reliable and repeating revolver, with then assistance and later refinement courtesy of Collier. Unfortunately for Wheeler, his patent has been lost, and we have more information about Collier's contributions and work, so it's he that gets a lot of the airtime in the books. Not undeserved, mind you. He wasn't like some kind of dilettante who lucked into historical relevance. Collier was an extremely talented man who did a lot of heavy lifting as well. At any rate, Nicholson begins with a brief survey of repeating arms from the 1530s to the 1820s before launching into his narrative with an examination of Wheeler. From there, he shifts perspectives to Collier, where the reader is taken through a journey of the various patterns that his revolvers evolved through as the design continued to be refined. Fans of the process of design will probably be interested to see the small changes over time as Collier continued his work. Wheeler isn't forgotten though, as Collier, who had moved to London to patent the revolvers there, worked to interest the English military establishment in the firearms. So too was Wheeler trying the same with the Americans. Now I'm not going to ruin their story, plus one that involves a Cornelius Coolidge, who was working in France. You can read it for yourself. Nicholson also chronicles the various extant Wheeler revolvers. Now afterwards, we return back to Collier's story, and Nicholson goes pretty deep into it. He wraps up the first volume of Clockwork Basilisk with a look at Collier's patents, a pair of court cases launched by legendary Samuel Colt that the two men testified at, and the ultimate historical importance that Wheeler, Collier, and their repeating firearms hold in history. The second book is essentially an extravagant appendix, which has a lot of supporting information, including an entry on every single known Wheeler and Collier firearm, the ones they may have made copies of and those inspired by. They also have field strip guides and proof mark guides. There's testimony delivered during the 1852 case launched by Colt, who may have done some underhanded things to obtain his patents, which publicized the by then decades-old Wheeler and Collier patents, and more. Strictly speaking, you don't need to read that second volume, but I love the absolute thoroughness that it represents. Which brings me to a related issue. Now, this is likely only going to bother people like me, but I'd be perpetually annoyed if I didn't bring it up in this review. Headstamp Publishing would appear to not know what this book actually is. On page 9, Headstamp Publishing states, images may have been retouched digitally when deemed appropriate or necessary by the publisher. No image or content should be relied upon by the reader for any purpose other than entertainment. Eh? On page 22, we have a reprinted letter from the American Society of Arms Collectors, who state in the first paragraph, after careful review by select members and the chairman of the publication committee has found that this book to be a highly original and important reference publication. But which one is it? I emailed Headstamp about this, but never got a response. If they do, I'll leave a pinned comment below. Was the first admonition some kind of boilerplate that lawyers, insist upon? I can't think of a reasonable explanation. It doesn't impact the quality of the book, but I'll be damned if I can figure out why a publisher would have included that in a book like Clockwork Basilisk. At any rate, I'm not going to go into an exhaustive pros and cons about this. I found the book to be incredibly well researched. The amount of time that Nicholson and his contributors spent examining firearms and documents around the world obviously speaks to that. And if they left a stone unturned in reporting about these firearms and the men involved, I would be hard-pressed to point to it. The accompanying photos from a variety of sources are fantastic, and you get a sense of the hard work it took to refine an idea over time. Nicholson's academic credentials are not rooted in the world of firearms, but Clockwork Basilisk doesn't betray that. Now, I'm going to be honest. As a layperson, I am not ideal to judge the merits of the research I just praised. However, it seems to be that Nicholson's work is as complete as it possibly could be with what is known about the Wheeler and Collier firearms today. About the only knock that comes to mind is that this is not a light read. This is written to be a reference work, regardless of what Headstamp Publishing states, and these tend to be more interested in being as complete as possible than being airy reads. Now, that's not to say that this book will push you unmercifully, merely that some histories are written to lightly dance over subject matter, while others will deep dive to include technical, aesthetic, and ideological factors as part of their story. So, why would you want to read books about revolvers with clockwork advanced cylinders that were along the path in the evolution towards modern revolvers? Well, as Othias over at CN Arsenal has pointed out in recent videos, the history of revolvers is a pretty tangled mess, with dueling designs and patents, some of which we know about and others that we don't. I think Clockwork Basilisk helps fill out a piece of this history. That, if you're a gun geek, particularly for gun history, this is the kind of thing that is your jam. So, would I recommend this? Headstamp Publishing can release books on some rather esoteric subjects, and I think it's fair to say that a 2-volume effort on clockwork-powered cylinders for revolvers would probably comfortably fit into that. Given the cost and the subject matter, I'd say that this is aimed more at your hardcore gun geek or gun history aficionado. Nicholson himself says as much when in the chapter on patents for the Wheeler and Collier guns, he notes that the language might be too much for the non-technically minded and that they can just look at the pictures, read the captions, and move on to the next chapter. If your response to hearing about dense thickets of patent language is "tell me more," then this might be in your wheelhouse. If you're a more casual fan of gun history, this might be a little too specialized for you unless you have a real craving for learning about slight differences in frisons and priming systems from firearm to firearm. I think most people will get a lot out of Clockwork Basilisk, but you're forewarned going in. At any rate, I hope you found today's video to at least be vaguely entertaining and mildly informative. As always, I hope you have yourself a fantastic day. Take care, and bye-bye.